Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Lucie Blackman and Carita Ridgway. All I can say is, what a case. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Hi, how are we? I hope we're all okay. I do apologise if there is any flakiness going on with my skin today because the sun came out. The sun came out and it was unexpected and it was hot. It was like a freaking summer's day when the whole rest of the weather has just been, here I am talking about the weather, standard. But it was really, it caught me off guard and I got a sunburn on my forehead. No, thank you. So I feel a bit flaky. I'm diligent with the sun cream as well, but without further ado, year 2000, Tokyo, Lucie Blackman is 21. She has been working as a flight attendant for British Airways and she's an adventurous soul. In 2000, herself and her friend Louise Phillips, they decide to go and be in Tokyo. Don't really know, because they didn't just go for like a week or two. They went out there to make money, and they both got jobs at a club called Casablanca as a hostess with the mostess. It is a popular job, or it was, excuse me, because my research is actually from 2000. It was a popular job for foreign women in Japan. The money was good, and it was seemingly quite an easy job, and you get to go to Japan and see another part of the world. So, a hostess is, if you don't know, I'm just going to give you a slight lesson in it so that you know the context. If you do, I apologise. I don't want to butcher this and get it wrong, but this is my interpretation of what I've read. Wealthy businessmen will go to these clubs after work, and the hostess that they sit with or that they choose will get them drinks, light their cigarettes, have chit-chat with them, make them feel, be nice to them. A little bit flirtatious, but from what I read, it is not sexual, and most of the clubs and bars don't allow sexual conversation, and they're not allowed to touch the women either. So it's kind of like make-believe, like pretend, like they just get to pretend that this woman who is working is interested in them and likes them. They make them feel good. It's like a feel-good thing, make them feel good. It is not like a strip club. There's no nudity, there's no dancing, there's no touching, there's nothing sexual about it. Wow. I also read that there are different areas in Japan and in Tokyo that are seedier than others, let's just say. There's a darker side to it. I read an article where a woman from the UK went over to a not very nice area and drug use and things like that, and the pressure to actually sleep with the customers is quite intense and high. So she said she would work in one club for a little while until the pressure got too much, and then she'd go to another one and sort of move around like that, because she said many girls that she saw there did end up in prostitution. What is common with a hostess is that if a man takes a liking to you in the club, they fancy her, they can request a date. This is called a dohan. So the man will pay the club quite a larger amount of money to take that hostess out for the evening, wine and dine them, treat them well. They walk around with this pretty woman on their arm, that sort of thing. And the hostess gets paid even more for that as well. And at the end of the evening, the man has to bring the hostess back to the club. And again, this is a point where it would be, there's more pressure, I suppose, for things to go further. They might offer to pay you more money and things like that. So it's a bit, it just feels, it's edgy, isn't it? Edgy. Lucie and Louise went to Japan on the 4th of May. And on the 1st of July, Lucie went on her first dohan from Casablanca Club, but she never returned. She'd gone on a pre-arranged date with this guy. He had taken her to the coast in a fancy apartment. He was very wealthy. Lucie called Louise at about 5 p.m. on that Saturday to say that she was at the coast, give her a sort of a rundown about the date so far. This guy was going to buy her a new phone. He'd given her a bottle of champagne. So I think she was in, quite good spirits. Like, oh, this is okay, isn't it? Lucie called Louise again at 7 p.m. to say that she would be leaving in about half an hour. The following morning, Louise gets a phone call. Also, I just suddenly felt so aware that they're just like 21. They're so young. Louise and in another country. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's just like I got pure anxiety. Boom. Anyway. In the following morning, Louise gets a phone call from a man. She doesn't know this man, and he says, "You will never see Lucie again because she has decided to join a cult." Good one. Right? That's okay. That's what he said. And then he hung up the phone. So Louise was quite panicked, obviously. Like, it's just a horrible situation. So she calls Lucie's parents, who are in the UK, to let them know what's gone on and that Lucie has just disappeared, joined a cult. There is not much that Lucie's family can do from the UK. They've made phone calls. They cannot get in contact with Lucie. She has just vanished. So Lucie's younger sister, I believe it's younger sister, I've just made that up, sorry. Could be older. It's not written in my notes, but it came out. That was shocking how easy it was to tell a mistruth. Apologise. I think I was just like keeping the flow. Ruin that. Anyway, so her sister, Sophie, good name, Blackman, decided to travel out to Tokyo. When she's out there, she speaks to the British Embassy, she speaks to the police in Tokyo, and it is a painful experience. And I cannot express to you how frustrating it felt. Like everything I read, and I saw some things as well, and I was just like, oh, like they didn't care. I'm going to just say that. They just didn't seem to care. They were like, she's a British woman that does that for a job. She's probably still out with someone. Her fault. Like, not a big deal. They made no waves whatsoever. Getting annoyed with my hair. It needs cutting and it's annoying me. Where was I? Lucie's dad, Tim, he flew out as well to Tokyo to be with Sophie because she was not getting anywhere. He also found the police very unhelpful, and it became apparent that they were going to have to really take this into their own hands to get anything done, to get anywhere with the case and to find Lucie. Tim was really proactive, so he organised a press conference. They put up loads of flyers of Lucie and, around, like, I think it was thousands, and they offered a reward. I read that the reward was 9,500. Why not make it 10 grand? That was literally I was like, what? Why? 10 grand? Why make it 9,500? Is there a reason for that? I don't think they were short a bob or two. But that's weird, isn't it? Well, I thought it was. Let it go. The most frustrating thing in this case is that they were desperate for the police to track the phone because, the eye and is itching. Oh. This weird man had called Louise, and Lucie had been ringing Louise from somebody else's number, so they wanted that traced because that's who she was with when she went missing, right? Job done, you would think. No, because the police were not willing to do that because it is a breach of privacy. So what? Like, there's somebody missing. But they just didn't take it seriously. So, no, we're not going to do that. It's a breach of privacy. Like, it's so frustrating. Lucie's case then got quite a lot of media coverage because Tony Blair went out to Japan. He was the Prime Minister at the time. He was visiting and he mentioned her case while he was there. Her parents, I think, were maybe well connected, or they reached out to every single person that they possibly could to get things moving, get the case going. Tony Blair, a retired Met police officer, Di Davis. So Lucie's mum reached out to him, so he was sort of working and helping them. Derry Irvine, he was Britain's Lord Chancellor, and he happened to go out to Japan for a visit, and they spoke to him as well. The thing that proved the most productive was a hotline. They set up a hotline for people to call in because they quickly realised that women, especially, were not comfortable to go to the police. So this hotline could be anonymous and they could just, call in with any information they might have about Lucie. So that was a really good idea. They had hundreds of phone calls, and most of the phone calls were from women who were working as hostesses. Is that English? Go with it. And they had gone on a date with a man, Japanese man, wealthy, who had taken them to his apartment on the coast. So it was this coast connection. And they had all had a very similar story. They met him, they chatted a bit, went to his apartment, he gave them a drink that was unusual, and then they can remember nothing else. Some of them had vague memories of being kind of sort of coming to a little bit in the night and seeing a red dot on, like they were being filmed with a video camera. Spoiler alert, they weren't wrong. They woke up the next morning very unwell, desperate to leave. They would leave and then spend the whole rest of that day being really poorly. Basically, they had been drugged. And they all had this very similar story to tell. Can you imagine that as Lucie's dad? Oh. They all described the same man as well, late 40s, well-dressed Japanese man. Finally, with this knowledge, the police started to kind of move on the investigation, and they reopened or re-looked at cases where women had come forward to say they had been abused or R-worded. Derry Irvine, he had the Chancellor, Britain's Chancellor, what was he called? Britain's Lord Chancellor, mouthful. Tim and Sophie were hoping that his legal expertise, his knowledge, could help them. And it did, because they managed to convince the police in Tokyo that tracing a phone number in a missing person case was not a breach of privacy, because it was a criminal case, and a criminal case is private. So they do finally look at that phone number and they trace it. And with this information, they find the owner of that phone, Joji Obara. He is arrested, he is interviewed, and he is a no comment, one of them. The police begin searching his properties. He has multiple because he is very rich. Turns out he was very well stocked on drugs, mainly chloroform. There were multiple things that they found that are just like, sicko checklist, yes. It's almost unreal, isn't it, when things like this are real? Do you know what it's like? Oh, is this a film? I always think that. Is this really real? Yeah, they found videotapes, hundreds, rolls of undeveloped film, notebooks that he had kept about his dates with women. Why do they keep notebooks? Why do they keep videos? I mean, obviously I know why, because it's like, replay it, sicko, Just the thought that they actually go back and they're like, having a read, having a watch. But it's always the undoing of them, isn't it? It's that compulsion, they can't help it, they need something to keep, but they, it's evidence, mate. As they were looking through these notebooks, diaries, if you will, they came across, just hundreds of women's names and, descriptions and things like that. And they found one woman's name, Carita Ridgway, and next to her name it just simply said, too much chloroform. That's really worrying. The police did go on to investigate that further. While they were looking through all of these tapes, they discovered the depths of his I can't think of another word other than sicko. Each video showed Obara in a mask and R-wording unconscious women. Hundreds of them. Sadly, one of those videos was Carita. Carita's story was not that different to Lucie's. She was from a different place. She was from Australia. She was working as a hostess in Tokyo in 1992. She had gone out there to make some money. She was a model in Australia, but she had decided to change her career pathway and she wanted to be an actress, but it was very expensive to go to acting school. So when her sister Samantha moved to Tokyo to become an English language teacher, Carita followed because she could make some money out there. It was quite good pay. So they moved to Tokyo. However, she couldn't find a job and she then became a hostess. The lure of that money got her into that job. Again, very, very similar. I really want to talk about Carita, by the way. Sorry to interject myself. Because she's known as the forgotten victim. And I find that really sad because her story is the same story with slight differences. It's still valid and important, and it was part of this case. So I find that really sad, and I feel like, we definitely need to give we need to tell her story as well. If we're going to talk about Lucie Blackman, we need to talk about Carita. Carita went on a Dohan, and she didn't return. And the following day, or the day after that, one of the people that she lived with her sister got a phone call to say that Carita had gone off with friends and that she was not coming back. Again, an unusual, odd thing to do. Why make the phone call? No one's going to believe it. Oh, they've joined a cult. Oh, they've just gone off with friends. Never going to see them again. Okay, bye. So Samantha, her sister, was just like, what? She's gone missing. She's missing, and all this panic and everything. But the following day, she got a phone call from the local hospital to say that her sister had been admitted by an older man, Japanese man, and that he had simply said that he had been with Carita and she had eaten bad shellfish. And she was very poorly. She was in the hospital. He'd given his name as Mr. Nishida. And then he just disappeared. Doctors diagnosed hepatitis, which is a liver infection. They didn't really know what was wrong with her. They came up with that diagnosis. Her symptoms were not matching bad shellfish at all. She was desperately, desperately ill. Carita had to be placed on life support. And after a number of days, they determined that, sadly, she was brain dead. So Samantha had to make the awful decision to turn off Carita's life support. Despite not knowing at all, really, what had happened to her and what she was dying of, there was no autopsy done. That blows my mind. Bizarrely, while Samantha was at the hospital day in, day out with her dying sister, she was receiving these mysterious odd phone calls from the man that had left her sister at the hospital, Mr. Nishida. He was so adamant. He wanted to keep reassuring Samantha that he was telling the truth and that Carita had eaten bad shellfish and that he tried everything he possibly could to save her. And he kept on ringing. It's like, leave her alone. Carita's life support was turned off just days before her 22nd birthday. It's such a tragic story and a very confusing one for her family because they just did not know what had happened. This guy, he wouldn't give them a return phone number to ring, and the police refused to track his phone number or to look into him any further or to do an autopsy or to take any of this seriously. They were just like, oh. The minute they found out that she was a hostess, they no longer really cared about it. They were like, nah, she got herself in trouble, she ate some bad shellfish, job done. They didn't look into it at all, and they didn't take the case seriously. Surprisingly, Mr. Nishida actually agreed to meet her family and tell them about her last moments and what had happened. He was visibly distressed, he was sweating, he met them at the airport, and he just repeated the same story over and over, that she had eaten bad shellfish, they had been on a date, that he liked her very much, and that she had literally got food poisoning, and he'd done everything he could to save her, and he had taken her to the hospital, but it was unfortunate. When he was there, he produced a diamond ring and a necklace, and he gave it to the family, and he said that these were gifts he was about to give Carita for her 22nd birthday. I mean, that's what? And then he also offered them a large amount of money, but they had to sign a piece of paper to say that her death had been a result of hospital negligence, in order to get the money. So he was just bribing them. At that point, you would just know that you are face to face with the person that has somehow, and you don't even know how, but has caused the death of your child. Why would you be doing that? Offering money, but you've got to sign this thing because it was nothing to do with me. What? 8 years later, the family saw all over the news in Australia the story of Lucie Blackman, who has disappeared in Tokyo, and there are lots of similarities in the case. The police are at the time investigating Carita's case again because her name has been found in these diaries and she's sadly on the videotape. And even though Carita had been cremated, the hospital had kept a sample of her liver. Can you believe that? I couldn't believe that. So they had this sample, they tested it, and it was positive for chloroform. So it proved that Carita had been given an overdose, and that is how she had died. After all of those years of her family knowing that something was wrong, something was amiss, this is not what had really happened to their daughter, they had to just go home, fly back to Australia with no answers at all, not being taken seriously. And then 8 years later, and that's why I hate the fact that she's the forgotten victim, because it's so tragic. They weren't listened to in the first place. And then because Lucie goes missing, finally their daughter gets the justice that she deserves. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it did happen, so they did, they got some answers. Obara was charged with 8 R words. 8. They must have struggled to, find all of the victims or for people to come forward, which is quite common, I think. And he was also charged with Carita's murder. At this point, Lucie Blackman is still a missing person. From what I could read, they never found any film of Lucie Blackman, a video or anything like that. And there was no DNA evidence found in his property, at the apartment. There was nothing. However, the undeveloped roll of film, that had Lucie Blackman's pictures on it. There was a picture of her at the beach near his apartment and a picture of her in his apartment. The police looked at his computer and his recent searches were how to get rid of a body. How to get rid of a body. And his phone record showed that on the 2nd of July, the day after he had gone on his date with Lucie, his Dohan, he had called local hospitals to ask how he could help somebody who had taken too many drugs. It's painting a picture. He bought a chainsaw. And on the 3rd of July, the caretaker of his apartment building called the police to complain about the racket that was coming from Obara's apartment. And they came and they spoke to him and he was visibly sweating, uncomfortable. But they couldn't just walk in. They had no reason to. And he told them that he was retiling his bathroom. And that's what all the noise was. 7 months after Lucie Blackman went missing, 7 months, they found the remains of Lucie Blackman's body. It was the 9th of February 2001, and it was down on in the mouth of a sea cave near his apartment, not far from it at all. She was found in a shallow grave underneath an upturned bathtub, and her body had been cut into 10 pieces, with her head being shaved and then encased in cement. They had to use dental records and DNA to identify the remains. And I just don't understand how they could have had a search in the area with dogs. Excuse me, what is occurring with my voice? It's like Kermit the Frog. And not found her body before. How can that be? Now, there is a speculation that in Tokyo, this is not speculation, this is true, in Japan, 90-something% of their cases are confession based. So they get, it sounds almost like, that's how they roll. So they work very, very hard to get confessions out of people to, and that's the process. And this guy is no matter what they did or said, he refused to confess. And it's almost like they didn't know what to do with that. Like, everything we tried, he doesn't say he did it. So, head scratcher. You know, they don't really rely on physical evidence and things like that, but they had to in this case because he was having none of it. Lucie's body was badly decomposed. There was no way that they could determine her cause of death. And really, when everything came together, the only evidence that they had was, you know, the film with two pictures of her in his apartment and on the beach, and that only proved that they had had a date together, and he admitted that they had, but he didn't kill her. Even though all of the things that we have discussed point incredibly strongly to the fact that he drugged her. Why are you ringing? The day after your date, why are you ringing the hospitals? Like, what do I do when someone's had an overdose? Oh, who was that then, mate? No one, like, made it up. I don't know, like, they didn't have any physical evidence. It was all circumstantial. And it seems like that was just like, no, you know, we can't do anything with that. So despite common sense and all of these things, you know, painting a very clear picture, really, that he had accidentally, probably, overdosed Lucie with chloroform and then panicked and didn't know what to do, that was all circumstantial. Prosecutors, though, did have evidence that he had drugged and R-worded many women. Obara pleaded not guilty, and his trial began in 2003. And the family were warned that it would be a very long trial. And it really was. It was like 3 years or something, or maybe 4. It was a long old trial. I don't know why. From what I can gather, like, they just don't move very quick over there. They're not like, you know, it's not like nothing's urgent. Anyhow, 3 years into the trial, this is juicy and this is spicy. Obara offered Lucie's parents money. They were divorced. He offered them both £450,000. This is not unusual in Japan. And again, he tried similar, hadn't he, with Carita's parents. But, you know, it's normally the guilty party pay like a compensation to the victim's family. But he was saying he was not guilty. However, his lawyer said that this offering was because in whatever happened to Lucie, whatever happened to her, it had been as a result of going to his apartment because her body had been found near his apartment. So, you know, if she hadn't have gone on the date with him, it wouldn't have happened. But it wasn't him and he didn't kill her. Lucie's mum refused the money. Didn't like that. No. And Lucie's dad took the money. And then that was all in the press, arguing. She's like smeared him for taking the money. Oh, gosh. He said he took it as payment for all of the trauma that, you know, had been created over the years. On the 24th of April 2007, 4 years. The trial was 4 years. 3 judges found 55-year-old Obara guilty of 8 counts of the R word and Carita's murder. In her case, they had the video footage of what he had done to her and proof that he had taken her to the hospital and met her family, and proof that with the sample of her liver about, you know, the overdose of chloroform. And you wouldn't be giving that to yourself, would you? And then, sadly, he was acquitted of Lucie Blackman's murder. The prosecution immediately appealed that, and then another year later, in December of 2008, he was found guilty of Lucie Blackman's murder. So, you know, what you're doing, where you're going. But justice was served. Like I said, what a case. What a case. My thoughts on it are just, you know, my concluding thoughts are, because sometimes I have to like have a little think about it, because, you know, piece it all together, that with Carita, his MO was drugging, R-wording, you know, and then off they go. That was his thing, and then he kept the tapes of it, and he had a little diary of it, and that was what got him off. My thought on it is that Carita it was accidental. It was too much of the chloroform, like he'd written in his book, and he had taken her to the hospital. And I think the behaviour around Carita and Lucie, I don't feel like it was that of a serial killer, like somebody that was going to I don't think so, because he wasn't escalating. It's like unfortunately, it was like, unfortunately, on 2 occasions, it went wrong. And for some reason, there was too much chloroform and it was like accidental overdose. I don't mean accidental like, oh, he should have got away with it or anything. No, he killed people. And you shouldn't be doing whatever, you know? I don't think he meant to. There was 8 years between Carita's death and Lucie's. I think with Carita, she was still alive and she was really poorly, so he took her to the hospital. And then with Lucie, sadly, I think she passed away at his flat. And that's where this sort of panic and how to get rid of a body and ringing the hospitals. Perhaps he was trying to help her at home. I feel like I'm kind of making it seem like giving him excuses, but I just think that these were like, it went too far and it was an accident and then he had to cover his tracks. Still vile. I still think he's a vile human being. But yeah, I don't see it as like a serial killer in the making sort of thing. He wanted to do what he wanted to do, which is grim and sick. But then, you know, on these 2 occasions, and if he'd have carried on, there would have been more. But it went horribly wrong. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments. It's quite I had lots of emotions with it because of Carita and her story, her part of the story, and also the similarities between those 2 girls. So under, 21 years old, gone to Tokyo, excited, trying to make money, working, being in another country, so young, so vulnerable, so excited, so full of life, and then they meet this guy. Oh, and that is all I have for you on today's case. How are we? I'm in a good mood. I'm happy. I'm excited. Don't know why. It's good though, isn't it? Yeah, not much going on. Life is a bit boring at the moment, as I say, because of, same old, but there is only 5 more weeks of university and then I am done. When that happens, I will be here. I will be crying. I'll be drinking all the gin. Yeah. The kids are back at school. I feel like I just have like a zen around me. They've been back for how many days? 3 days. Just a little bit of peace makes all the difference. Just a little bit of quiet. New human. Anyway, my loves, my sinners, please drop me some case suggestions in the comments. I love that. Thank you. I desperately need some slippers on my feet. My feet are cold. It sounds like an Eminem song. Some slippers on my feet. Some slippers on my feet. Okay, right, stop it. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass or a vase or a brass or a jars of gin. Oh, and I will see you all next week. Love you. Be good. Bye.